Greetings, my dearest listeners. I am Escritoria Minora the Eighth, Keeper of Law of Arthurtania Supremia herself, and your narrator for today. In today's subject of interest, I shall be reading a story from a so-called r/nosleep subreddit by the creator, Sarkis Unveiled. Upon another platform, intriguing. Read and tweaked for your listening pleasure. This tale follows an unknown individual who seems to have found themselves in quite a draining situation, the slowpoke. Stories, folktales, recollections, memories from past and present, all of which I bring upon you today, are to be observed with the utmost clarity. So sit, listen, at everything that I have to offer, and be still, for I shall lift upon those dusted narratives, unearthed for you today. Let us begin. Hello? Hello? Can anyone hear me? I don't know how long I've been here. Hell, I don't even think that I don't think I've blinked for a couple of days. Listen, to anyone who's hearing this, if you're armed, at the Glenmont Metro, please, shoot me. Make it a headshot. Shoot me in the temple. Aim slightly downwards. About 115 degrees. I need the bullet to travel the shortest possible distance through my brain before it hits my hippocampus. If I'm lucky, the sensation of the gunshot ripping through my skull will last only a few decades. As awful as this sounds, you'll be doing me an enormous favor. Death by a headshot as soon as possible is vastly better than the alternative. Okay. In case you're wondering, over 10,000 years ago, though for anyone listening, it would have perhaps been a few hours, maybe a couple of days. I can't remember anymore. It was around 10:15 in the morning. I earn extra money by participating in drug trials. I'm a so-called healthy subject who takes experimental drugs to help assess effects. Nausea, heart palpitations, everything in between. Once it was a kidney drug, a few times it's been something for blood pressure or cholesterol. This morning they told me the drug I took was a psychoactive substance intended to accelerate brain functionality. Some college, high school kind of stuff. I really don't know. I forgot. Feels like it's been forever. Today's drug was different. This shit worked. They gave me a pill at 10:15 and told me to hang out in the waiting room until they called me back for some tests. Only about 30 minutes. So I went to the reading room couch. I read a few articles from Psychology Today. I was sitting in the coffee table. They hadn't called me back when I finished it, so I picked up the US News. Then I read Scientific American. What was taking them so damn long? I suddenly turned my head to look at the wall clock. It was only 10:23 a.m. I had read all 3 magazines in 8 minutes. I remember thinking this was going to be a long day. I was right. The waiting room had little bookshelves with some used hardcovers on it. When I stood up to walk to the bookshelf, it felt like my legs barely worked. It's not that they were weak, they were just sluggish. It took a full minute just to stand off the couch, and another minute to take 2 steps to the bookcase. I scanned the old books on the shelf and picked out a copy of Moby Dick. My arms had the same problems as my legs. Just reaching one foot in front of me to grab the book took a long time. I actually got bored just waiting for my hand to reach the spine of the book. I stalked back on the couch and collapsed out. And, well, I let my body just fall back onto it. It felt like what you would really see with those astronauts in the ISS. Some anti-gravity kind of stuff. I opened the book and began reading. It started with Call Me Ishmael, and I got as far as Ahab throwing his pipe into the sea, which was all the way to chapter 30, before they called me back. "How are you feeling?" the research assistant asked me. I feel slow, I said. Well, actually, it's the other way around. Everything seems slow because you're so... But my legs, my arms, they're moving in slow motion. Your body seems like it's moving slowly because your brain is fast. Your brain is running 10 or 20 times faster than normal. You're thinking and perceiving reality at an accelerated pace, but your body is still constrained by the laws of biomechanics. Frankly, you're moving much faster than a normal person. She pantomimed in a jogging motion, like she was mocking me or something. But your brain is running so much faster now that even your walking speed seems quite slow to you. I don't know what I expected to hear that day, but that, some scientific, fictional mumbo-jumbo coming from somebody who I barely knew. I should have guessed that freaking facility was... Anyway, I waited a bit more. If down, my body would still react to gravity the same way, but in the waiting room I felt slower than normal. Slow muscles couldn't explain why gravity seemed weaker, though. My brain was going at warp 10. That's how I managed to read 3 magazines and the first 30 chapters of Moby Dick in 15 minutes. They ran a series of tests on me. The physical tests were fun. They made me juggle 3 balls, then 4, then 6. I had no problem keeping 6 balls in the air because they seemed to be moving so slowly. It was boring, frankly, waiting for each ball to move through its arc so I could catch it and toss it back into the air. They threw Cheerios in the air and I caught them with chopsticks. They dropped a handful of coins and I counted the total value before they even hit the ground. The cognitive tests were less fun, very illuminating. Finished a 50-word search, around 3 seconds. Solved an intricate maze drawn onto a poster-sized paper, 2 seconds. View a slideshow projected at 10 images per second and answer detailed questions about what I saw. 95% accuracy. 250 on the Knopf scale. Apparently, that's deep into the superhuman range of thinking speeds. Well, they sent me home. It'll wear off in a few hours, they said, which will seem like days to you. Try to use the residual effects to get some work done. Catch up on work emails while you're still in high-speed mode. Half the words they used sounded like something that came out of some DC or Marvel Comics bullshit. Honestly, I felt like they were just making fun of me at that point. I was expecting some scientific essay of an explanation as to what was going on. Normally these tests didn't really last that long. Didn't really cause this amount of harm to me, yet here I was. Some flash experimentation for them. Oh my god. I'm gonna die here, aren't I? The ride home was horrible. It was only 3 metro stops, and in real world time it took only about 35 minutes. But in my time, it felt like 3 days. Days just walking out of the medical research suite into the elevator seemed like it took an hour. I sprinted out of the office, willing my legs to push me faster, but the laws of biomechanics, or whatever they said, held me prisoner. As accelerated as my brain was, I couldn't do anything to make my legs work faster. The huge disconnect between my body and my mind made it extremely difficult to judge how and when to slow down, turn, or even rotate my body. I had basically turned into a giant slow-motion spaz. I misjudged my speed and rammed into the wall by the elevator button at a pretty good speed. Even though I could see the wall coming at me, I couldn't make my finger outstretched to hit the elevator button move away fast enough, and jammed it against the wall. Hard. The pain was intense. If my brain had been running at regular speed, it probably would have hurt for 30 seconds or so. But in my accelerated state, the intense pain made it seem to last for half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe. As well, it felt like spending 4 or 5 hours just ascending 7 floors with nothing to look at but the interior of the elevator car. I sprinted to the metro station. I have to admit that part was almost fun, even though my body moved at what seemed incredibly slow speed. I could still carefully choose how and where to place my feet, turn my torso. It only took a block or two to getting used to having a brain that ran 24 times faster than my body. And I basically sprint danced the rest of the way, twisting and juking between people on the sidewalk and dodging moving cars within inches, aka minutes, of clearance. I spent an hour, in my time frame, descending into the subway and running to the platform. Endless tedium, waiting the 6 minutes for the red line train to arrive. Although there was a central platform then inside the elevator, it was still intensely boring. I should have stolen that copy of Moby Dick. The red line train roared into the station in slow motion. The normally high-pitched squeal of its brakes was shifted in frequency by my high-speed mind to a low and long tone, like a monotone tuba solo. It wasn't just the squeaking that was 3 octaves lower than normal. All sound was slow to the point of near inaudible. Voices were gone, shifted below the threshold frequency of my hearing. I did manage to hear a screaming baby on my subway car. Her shrieks slowed down to the sound of whale songs. Sharp sounds like a car horn and trucks bouncing over potholes were low, muddled roars like distant thunder. Back at the research offices, I could still hear and communicate with the research staff, but now verbal communication with anyone would be impossible. The effects of the drug were still intensifying. I spent what seemed like days on that fucking red line train. Days. Listening to the whale song of screaming babies and the tuba solo of brakes, where ordinary voices were frequencies that were no longer that of my normal life. But smells didn't seem to be affected, at least. I never became nose-blind to the body odor, the stench of the train's brakes, and the melange of other smells wafting through the metro car. I finally got back to my apartment, sprinting through my open door and into the front hall at full speed, like I was some insignificant snail. But it felt relieving, although I was afraid I would have turned 80 by the time I opened the knob to my apartment. And and at least I had stuff to do there. I picked up another book I was reading, 100 Years of Solitude, and finished it. Despite turning the pages so quickly that I tore many of them, it seemed like most of the time I spent finishing the book was spent on page turning and not actually reading. 3 minutes had passed since I got home. I tried surfing the internet. My God, it takes a long time for computers to boot. But it was frustrating, to say the least. Hours, seemingly, to load each new page, and a fraction of a second to read it. I was in my newsfeed, read, and just 3 more minutes done. I dipped into my pile of yet-to-be-read books and finished 2 more. 4 more minutes had passed. I decided to try to sleep off the remaining effects of the drug. Unfortunately, whatever part of my mind is responsible for perception, the part that's been accelerated by the drug, isn't the same as the part that governs sleep. Despite being awake for what I perceived as days, my physical brain still thought it was 1:25 p.m. It was not ready for sleep. Nevertheless, I tried. I walked to my bedroom. A 45-minute drift through my apartment and flung myself into bed, lazily falling down. I closed my eyes and lay there for hours and hours, 10 minutes in reality, before giving up. Sleep would not come. I was facing what was going to feel like days or maybe even weeks of being trapped in this prison. So I took an Ambien. The sensation of the pill and the splash of water I used to swallow it sliding down my throat was sickening. A lump that blocked my breathing, moving down like a slug down my esophagus. Do you know how it feels to barely be able to suck in a single ounce of air? I read a book. 10 minutes had passed. 18 minutes since I took the Ambien. I threw the book across the room in disgust at everything. It hit the wall with a low, faint rumble, the only sound I heard for what seemed like hours. The force of gravity hadn't changed since I took the pill. The laws of physics were the same. It was just my perception of time that had gone completely out the window. And this meant I could only use the speed things seemed to fall as a way of judging the effects of the drug. Based on how long it took the book to drift to the floor, I estimated the effects were multiplying rapidly, exponentially. I read a magazine. I turned on the television. I clearly saw each frame of the video like I was watching a slideshow. Frustrated, I turned the television off. I read some more. The first 2 books of Churchill's The History of the English-Speaking Peoples. Not exactly a favorite. Frankly, I hated it. But given the hours of tedium it would take to get another book off my bookshelf, just sitting on the couch and reading Churchill was better. Or at least less worse. It had now been 35 minutes since I took the Ambien. I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. Time passed. I inhaled an hours-long process. Time passed. I inhaled for more hours. Sleep would not come. Sleep. God, I am so tired. I needed a new plan. I decided to go back to the offices where they gave me the drug. Maybe they would have something that could counteract its effects, or at least something to knock me out until it wore off. I exited my apartment as fast as possible, taking hours of my time frame to do so. I didn't even bother locking the door. It would have taken too long. Down the stairs, it's faster than the elevator if you run, through the lobby, out the front door, and onto the street. Past Woodbridge Avenue, past that 7-Eleven across the street. I tried my best to get there as soon as possible, but these few things felt like a long day at the office. Sprinting down the street, dancing and weaving between pedestrians with what must have looked to them like superhuman dexterity, like some animal they couldn't even see. Across the landing, down the first flight of stairs at the metro, another hour, then onto the second flight of stairs. That's when the Ambien hit me. Well, the Ambien didn't make me sleepy, not at all. Instead, it must have had a severe cross-reaction with the experimental drug I took this morning. I was bounding from flight of stairs by moving in slow motion, but still making perceptible progress. Then, wham! Everything stopped. The dull roar of the street and metro with the most perfect silence I've ever experienced. My downwards motion seemed to completely freeze before it kicked in. My perception of time was maybe a few hundred times slower than real life. But after the Ambien took effect, time moved thousands of times slower. Every second seemed like days to me. Even just moving my eyes to focus on a new point was like an impossibly slow scroll across my visual feed. Over the course of the afternoon, I learned how to walk, run, and jump when my mind ran hundreds of times faster than my body. But with another 4 or 5 orders of magnitude of slowness caused by the cross-reaction, body control was almost impossible. I fell on the stairs. Even though I was all but frozen in mid-step, controlling my muscles was impossible. I commanded my foot forward for hours, and backwards for hours more when it seemed like I would miss the next step. Hours attempting to adjust the angle of my ankle, then readjusting when it felt wrong. Despite these efforts, I rolled my ankle on the next step. The pain wasn't at all mitigated by its slowness. Hours of increasing strain on my bent ankle. The nerve signals that send pain into the brain must work differently than the nerves in my ear. Sonic energy was spreading out over time, diluted until it was imperceptible. Pain flowed into my brain, undiluted by the change of perception of time. Hours and hours of increasing weight on my turned ankle turned into hours of increasing pain upon pain. I pitched forward, my high-speed mind completely unable to control my low-speed body. I drifted downwards for days, managing to rotate my torso enough to keep my head from impacting the ground first. I eventually landed on my right shoulder. At first, the impact wasn't even noticeable. Then I felt a slight pressure in my shoulder as it came into contact with the ground. The pressure grew, bringing increasing pain for hour upon hour. My shoulder finally gave out, popping out of its socket with an endless tug. I came to a stop days later, crumpled onto the ground, staring at the ceiling, the pain in my shoulder still screaming with intensity of a fresh, violent injury. I had plenty of time to think during that fall. If every second seemed like days to me, then each minute of real-world time would be like years. If the drug cleared out of my system in the next 2 or 3 hours, this nightmare would seem to last centuries. By the time I hit the ground, I had a plan. I would somehow get to the platform and throw myself in front of the train. I twisted onto my hands and knees, days of my dislocated shoulder crying for relief. I misjudged my rotation and rolled onto my back. I tried again, collapsing onto my face as I tried to figure out how to control a body slower than anything you could ever imagine. Weeks of effort were finally rewarded with success. I stabilized on my hands and knees. If just getting was difficult, I figured that walking or running was completely out of the question. So I crawled. I crawled to the metro tunnel. The dumb look on the faces in the crowd lingered on me for weeks. I crawled under the turnstile and onto the escalator. It spilled the rush hour crowd onto the platform at the same speed as glaciers. I looked out into the crowd platform during my intermedial downward ride. The train status sign said the next train wouldn't be arriving for 20 minutes. 20 minutes was like a year to me. I'd have to spend a year on the metro platform waiting to die. I crawled off the escalator, enduring days of stupid expressions on the commuters' faces. Just the thought of all those eyes staring at somebody who was going to do something no normal or sane person would ever experience. But honestly, am I normal? Am I sane anymore? Everything that I've experienced has led me to this exact location. The massive slowdown on the stairs was just the beginning of the interaction between the experimental drug and the Ambien. It fully hit me while I was curled up by the bench. I blinked. Years of darkness followed. Sound was already gone. With my blink, sight was gone as well. All that existed was the pain from my fall. My mind wasted no time compensating for the lack of sensory input. Voices spoke to me. They sung to me in languages that never existed. Patterns and colors came and went in my mind's eye. I recalled my whole life and imagined living another. I forgot English. I settled into a profound despair. God, I became God. I imagined a new universe and brought it to life with my thoughts. Then I did it all again. And again. My eyes opened with geological slowness, a faint glow, weeks, a narrow view of the metro platform, ankles of the commuters near me, and on the opposite wall. I extracted my phone from my pocket. A project that spanned decades. How can I even explain the boredom? The pain in my shoulder is nothing compared to the boredom. Every thought I can think of thought hundreds of times of the view of ankles and advertisements changes never. The boredom is so intense, it's tangible. Like an object of metal and stone wedged into my skull. Inescapable. What are my options? If I crawl and fall into the tracks without an oncoming train to crush me, I won't die. I'll experience an even more painful fall from the 4-foot drop, but I'll most likely be rescued by some do-gooder on the platform and unable to act when the train finally does arrive. My suffering in that scenario will be endless. So I wait for the train so I can throw myself under it. When it finally hits me, I'll experience the pain of being ripped to pieces for centuries until finally the light of life leaves my brain and my experience ends. I've lived hundreds of lifespans at the foot of this bench. I am far older in spirit than any human who has ever lived. Most of my experience has been a snapshot of pain huddled on the floor of a subway platform with an ankles and advertisements. This post is my plan B, my Hail Mary, my long shot. I spend life typing and posting this message in the hope that someone will read it and become convinced that my suffering must end. I'll try to record my voice next, though I doubt it would work. But if you're hearing this, then by God, hurry. Someone on this platform right now. Someone who will find the man curled up under, the man who crawled down the escalator, and kill him as swiftly as possible. A bullet to the temple. If you're armed at the Glenmont Metro, please shoot me.